Welcome to B2B Commerce Corner. Commerce Corner is a sub-series of the E-commerce Edge podcast discussing all things B2B commerce through the lens of agencies, consultants, merchants, and more. Enjoy. Another episode of the E-commerce Edge podcast. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome Pete KOTZBACH to the podcast. Welcome, Pete.
Hey, Jason, how are you, buddy? Appreciate the time.
It's so good to be with you today. We had some technical difficulties, but I feel like we had a breakthrough and we're back on track. And we're doing a bit of a pod swap here. I was recently on your The Travel Wins podcast, and we had a great conversation about digital nomadism, traveling, making a life around the world, and feels like you're a major player in this whole podcasting game. And you said that, I remember you were talking about the fact you got a shout out. You had some really well-known guests on to start off with, and really it exploded from there, perhaps more even than what you expected it could be.
By far, yeah.
It's exciting, isn't it?
It's surreal, yeah. It's something I don't really consider. It's just because it's just me.
Yeah.
And I do everything, and all of a sudden all of a sudden my friends are like, how'd you get them on the show? Oh yeah, I just asked.
Yeah, that's the thing. I'm fond of saying you don't get what you don't ask for. So the reality is, if you ask, the worst that can happen is somebody says no, but you might ask them again 6 months later and they might say yes. So you keep asking and you get a whole lot of no's in the beginning. But once you get up to a certain number of podcast episodes, and my podcast is now over 400 episodes, and man, getting yeses becomes a whole lot easier once you've got a little bit of credibility behind you. They say that pod fade kicks in for most people. Something like 98 or 99% of podcasts never get past episode 20. So I reckon if you get past episode 20, then you get past episode 100, and then you get into the multi-hundreds, getting yeses becomes a heck of a lot easier.
Yeah, I think maybe some of the guests are used to getting requests to be on podcasts. But like you said, it's like after 300, or I've been doing this since 2018, it maybe makes it more of a legit show than something I started in 2024. So
exactly.
But if you start in 2024, just keep going.
It's trendy, right? Having a podcast is the trendy thing, and I've been doing it since 2016, but going really hard and really serious since 2018 too. And man, it seems like everybody and their dog's got a podcast now.
I think that the Tori Spelling and her brother has one. I'm like, now I'm competing against Kara Stilton and everybody else.
I love it. Look, what I wanted to talk with you about today is not so much about your podcast, although that's super interesting, of course, but you have been in the B2B sales game for a hell of a long time. And on our Wednesday episodes, we talk all about B2B commerce. And we talk about it through the lens of sellers, buyers, agencies, consultants, platform vendors, etc. But what I haven't really had a chance to talk about much yet is through the lens of the sales people, the sales reps, the individuals that are working inside these B2B brands and manufacturers, wholesalers, distributors. I haven't had a chance to talk to a salesperson who has been around long enough to see the dramatic evolution of the industry, say over the last 10, 20, 30 years. And I felt you're the man to talk to about this because you work in the B2B space. You work in B2B sales. You have territories that you own, you run, you manage. You're working with retailers. You're working with B2B customers. And I'm sure what I thought to myself was, you probably have a lot to say about this evolution.
It's just an evolution, right? It's like I started selling computer software to buying it from a manufacturer in Japan and then selling it retail to retail stores throughout the country. That was 1987, 88. So just calling businesses and selling, my software goods. And then obviously we went through an economic slowdown, the first Gulf War. And that shut our business down, and then you started back up, and then I started working in appliance sales and cabinets and selling to builders. So we were the manufacturer and then sold to builders. No technology used whatsoever up until that point. I think that's when I started in emails and pagers. Cell phones were still too expensive. And so it was when you left to go to an account, there was no way for your boss or other people to get a hold of you. You would sit in your car for 2 hours, 3 hours, however long it took you to get to wherever you were going. And then all of a sudden the panic pagers would start hitting, the 911s. And then you'd have to find a public payphone because you didn't have a cell phone. So you'd have to go to a gas station and hope that the payphone worked and use your calling card to call back to the office to see what's going on and why are you getting 911 calls. That was unlucky on maps and not knowing traffic, blockages, nothing. You got stuck. There was no rerouting, instant rerouting. It was like, oh my God, I got to get my Thomas guide out and start finding different ways because the freeway stopped. That was my
trifold and bifold map and have it out in my car, and I fold it out and it's this big and I got to pull over to the side of the road so I don't crash into somebody as I figure out on the map of how I can get to where I'm going.
Yeah, that was B2B. That was hard. You're making me think back to like when I sold the computer software. It was like you could get yellow pages from different cities. You would like order yellow pages from Houston, from Dallas, from the big metros. And then we would find computer retail stores by going through the yellow pages of the different cities. Because there was no Google. There was no computer. Computer for games and word processing. That was it.
Wow. You were also telling me when I was on your podcast that even some of your business buyers, meaning the people that are buying, and you're working in the apparel industry now, the hat space, wearing one of your amazing hats today. You were telling me that you were actually at a site. I think it was a pop-up store. I think it was at a concert or something. There's a pop-up site, and there was one of your retailers that was selling there, and they didn't even do Instagram. They didn't have an Instagram profile. They weren't uploading content. They weren't doing anything. And you told me, you were like, man, I'm like a decade older than and I know how to use Instagram. And if I know how to use Instagram, how could it possibly be difficult for these guys to use Instagram themselves? And they were like, oh, we don't know what we're doing. And literally while you were standing there with them, you logged into Instagram, you took a photo, you snapped a photo, you did a little bit of editing to it, and you said, here, this is how you do it. And here, I've just posted it. And it was like you did it in all of about 3 minutes. And you said, that's just one example, I think, of this massive bifurcation that seems to be happening across every level of business, where some businesses embrace new technology, some businesses embrace new channels, some embrace the cultural revolution that technology is bringing to bear in the world, and some are just holding on for dear life, and they're going, oh my God, I hope I can keep doing things the way I've been doing them at least until I retire, right? And that's what it feels like some people. And then when you think about the AI revolution that is coming, never mind e-commerce and digital, you think about the AI revolution that's coming, and these people are in for a rude awakening, aren't they?
Yeah, I've used your term several times, and I've given you credit, digital native. And what we talk about on my show is just like you just said, the younger people tend to be digital native. They grew up with a phone, so it's second nature to them. People over 40, I'd say, still fight it. They're advertising on terrestrial radio still, but they won't do a free post on Instagram with locating their specific areas and checking the algorithms and hashtag of their territories. They won't do it for free, but they'll pay to have a 10-second spot on a radio station for three times during an hour or whatever.
And what's interesting is you pointed out, you said when we were recording together, you said V, and I was a follower of Gary V, and he just kept kicking my ass in the content space. I was consuming his content for years before I ever started being a creator. Yeah. But he just saying, you didn't come out of the womb knowing how to drive, but you figured that out, didn't you? And you said the same thing. Would you, for example, even stepping outside of the sales space, when you decided you wanted to start a podcast, you didn't come out of the womb knowing how to do a podcast. You didn't know how to do the recording. You didn't know where to upload it or host it or how to distribute it out to the different podcast channels or get it up to YouTube or anything else, but you figured it out. And I think you said you spoke to one of your daughters and she did a little bit of research on podcast technology and how this works and sent you some links, and you figured it out. And okay, you should buy this equipment. Here's Mike. Here's the bits and pieces you need. And here's how you do it. Here's the step-by-step of getting a podcast up and running. And you figured it out. And, you know, you're not a young man. You're not a millennial. You're not a Gen Z. And it just goes to prove that if you want something bad enough, and if it's interesting to you enough, and if you're motivated enough, you can figure it out, right?
100%. For one, YouTube is a wonderful thing to learn. just about anything you want to. Literally learning how to fix part of my wife's car via YouTube right now. Literally. I hit screen grab when it gets to the part, and then I go out to the car like, oh, there it is. And you podcasting the same way, and advertising for your B2B is the same way. It's difficult because the algorithm keeps changing and you get sucked into the K-hole of algorithms, SEO, and all that, which is search engine optimization for people that don't know the acronym. But yeah, you can definitely go down the wormhole of spending hours and hours trying to use the right keywords. And now Google doesn't use keywords, but now they do use keywords. And how many hashtags is too many hashtags? But you got to get started somewhere. It's not that hard.
And as you said, the barrier to entry is just a little bit of time and learning
Yeah.
and testing and trying and practicing. And in many instances, it doesn't even cost you any money. It's literally just a little bit of your time. You've already got access to the internet, being able to watch a few YouTube videos and look at a few websites and check out a few checklists. It's not that hard. It feels a little bit scary. It feels a little bit overwhelming at first. Like anything new, you learned how to speak, you learned how to write, you learned how to read, you learned how to do all these other things. It's just another learning process. And how has technology started to impact the B2B sales space from your perspective? I want to find a supplier of a good. They're also usually starting at Google. They're going widget manufacturer, widget supply wholesaler, widget distributor, brand wholesaler, whatever it is. They're starting their supplier search online too. And many manufacturers, wholesalers, and distributors feel like they're still stuck in the 1980s. They don't offer a self-service e-commerce experience to their B2B customers. They don't offer EDI. They don't offer e-procurement or punch-out. They don't offer digital sales channels or even digital service channels or a digital portal to their customers where their B2B buyers can't log in and track an order from the time it leaves your warehouse to the time it arrives at theirs. They can't log in and place a electronic quote request. They can't log in and lodge a electronic returns request. They can't check inventory. They can't download product information, point of sale material, exploded drawings, spec sheets. They can't do any. They can't do any of that stuff. They can't check their MOQ. They can't check their individual customer specific price list. They can't do any of this stuff electronically, and in many cases, it requires somebody like you for them to get that information or to have that interaction with a supplier. And what I have found is that as I start to consult to these manufacturers, wholesalers, and distributors, is that when we start to research if they track their sales reps' time and how much time they spend on each task, anywhere from 20 to 60% of a sales rep's time can be spent on pure admin functions, like no value add at all to them or the customer. They literally might have an iPad out in the field. They might take an order, but then they have to take it back to the office and they have to manually key it into the ERP system for the order to be fulfilled, to be sent out. Or the customer has to send them a PO with the spreadsheet of their order attached, and then the sales rep has to key that into the ordering system. Many brands just aren't embracing digital at all.
Yeah, wow. You just described my life. I rep 4 different brands. One is like it's digital in the sense of we have barcodes. I scan it in. It goes into the ordering system automatically. I enter in 1 medium, 1 large, 2 extra larges. That's pretty simple. And then you can get reports and breakdown and all that, and it's pretty instantaneous. The other smaller brands, 2 of them might have to. One has an order entry system, which is difficult to learn. And the other 2, I have to either handwrite out the order, and then I have to send the email, use the form, so that I can handwrite it here. I have to put it into my computer onto an Excel spreadsheet order form. Then I take that copy of that Excel spreadsheet order form, and then I have to transmit it and send it to the order department, and then make sure that they received it, because they handwritten stuff. Some people still do handwritten stuff.
Oh, yeah.
You have to handwrite orders, and it's just the 3 looks like a 2, or the 4 looks like a 5, or the 8 looks, so you have to go really slow. You have to do it in triplicate, which is how we all used to do it.
Yes.
10, 15 years ago. That was the way of the reps. It was all handwritten triplicate.
Yes. And you'd have a call cycle, right? You'd go, okay, every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks or whatever it is, I'm going to be on site. I'm going to go and visit them, and I'm going to make sure that they've done their stock take and find out what they need. And I'm going to write it down and on an order pad, and I'm going to take it back to the office, and we're going to get it into the system.
Yeah. And then the bigger Wrangler is, because they do so much in jeans, they actually provide a scanner to the retail. I forget what dollar amount you have to do, but so they can just scan it in, and that scan goes automatically to Wrangler and tells them how much the refill is. So with every pair of jeans they sell, they scan it in.
Oh,
And when it hits a minimum, Wrangler automatically ships out new jeans.
so yeah, they said the retailer sets the min max that they want to carry, and
Yeah.
scan it down, and then when it hits the minimum, boom, let's auto replenish. Yeah, what we consider almost like a subscription service in the B2C and D2C world, but it's auto replenish based on min maxes. The brands that you work with today and that you rep for, do any of them offer a self-service e-commerce buyers portal for their B2B customers to log into and place orders directly themselves?
Two of them, yeah.
Wow. But the other two do not.
No. And one is super easy to use and one is super not easy to use on the two that do use them. One is super easy. It's just set up like a cart. So
yes.
It's difficult to find the product.
Yep.
Because there's so many, there's 15,000 SKUs.
Yes.
So it's difficult to if you wanted a brown boot or, a gray hat or whatever, it'd be difficult to get to it. Once you learn it, it's easy. And then ordering it on the cart system is easy. The other one's not so easy. And then the other two don't have it at all.
And why do you think? Because e-commerce technology is specifically designed and tailored for B2B businesses, over the last 5 years in particular, that technology has come along in leaps and bounds. And there's probably 25 to 30 major e-commerce platform vendors that either are solely focused on B2B or are heavily focused on it. Why do you think that there's been this reticence in the B2B world in particular? And as I said, in the retail world, it would be unthinkable that you would have a brand that you wouldn't be able to buy from them online. Shopify store, for example, almost every startup is going to start out with a Shopify store or WooCommerce store, and they're going to be off to the races. And even if they have physical retail stores, it would be unthinkable today that they wouldn't offer an e-commerce experience to their customers. Why do you think there's been such a resistance in the B2B world to modern commerce technology and buying channels?
Trying not to get myself in trouble. Laziness, a perception that it's going to cost too much to set up.
Yep. Fear of the unknown, maybe.
And then 100% fear of the unknown, right? What we have is working. Why invest $100,000 into a system and we don't know if it's going to work?
Sure. Are you also seeing in the industry what I've witnessed over the last, say, 2 years in particular, 2 to 5 years in particular, is that these multi-generational family businesses, because a lot of these B2B businesses, they're 20, 50, 75, 100-year-old brands. Yeah. And now we've got the children or the grandchildren of the founders starting to come in and run these businesses. And a lot of times they're millennials and they're digital natives themselves. And so they come into these businesses and they go, I'm a digital native. How can we not be doing digital? How can we not be offering digital services to our customers? And that feels like a turning point for a lot of these businesses. It feels like that is the moment where they start to change. They start to adapt. They start to become more relevant to their millennial buyers, because now we've got digital natives on the buyer side and digital natives on the selling side. And that feels like when the stone starts to move a little bit in many cases.
What you said on my show is I think we're a generation or two away from that.
Yep.
Because I'm 57. The people that run you're making me that, because I have 4 companies I represent. They're all probably my age or a little bit older.
Yep.
And I'm trying to think. Several of them don't have a Facebook page. They don't have an Instagram page. They go on Google or whatever their news source is to get their information. And that's it. Like social media, they don't go on TikTok. They don't know about Snapchat. You go out and you start talking about, hey, you'd be able to, if we could just scan this in, then you would get the order. And they're like, scan what in? Like, then we'd have to set up barcodes. How do we do that? You just make lines and you're like, oh, how do you not know?
Yeah.
But then it gets into kind of, because there's so much proprietary software and scan guns. There's no
one solution that necessarily will work for everybody.
Am I going to?
They have ERPs. They got to have manufacturing systems. They got to have warehouse management systems. They got to have fulfillment systems. Like when I go and consult to them, it's like, how can you be so advanced in the back office of the business.
Yeah.
Because you have to be efficient. You have to manufacturing efficiency, you have to have distribution efficiency, all that sort of stuff. You've got some level of automation there. You've got some level of system integration there. You've got the ability to create a tech pack through usually a PLM, a product lifecycle management platform of some variety, where you do your designs, you create your tech pack, you send that off to maybe a contract manufacturer, your own manufacturers. Like, you've got a lot of technology in the business already just to be able to do what you do. So why is it that you're not willing to even consider the sales channel and service channel technology upgrades when you already have to run relatively high tech stuff in the back end just to be efficient enough to be profitable at what you're selling and what you're making?
I can give you my opinion.
Yeah, I'd love to hear it.
I think a lot of companies, they work so hard to manufacture XYZ.
Yep.
Whether it's a gong, a cell phone, a mouse, whatever.
A hat, whatever it is.
Yeah. And they think, once I make a good quality product, people will find out and I'll sell my quality product. So they spend their time in the distribution, the manufacturing, the layout, all that, because they think that's what they need.
Yes.
And then they go, but because it's very difficult to quantify. If you spend X amount of dollars on Instagram or Meta, or in order to X to advertise your product, it's very difficult to come back and say, because we advertised, we spent $1,000 with Meta, and we got 80,000 in sales. It doesn't work that way. It's marketing. So some of it's unquantifiable.
But a lot of these brands, they don't even have a customer-facing catalog, digital catalog that can even be indexed by Google for free, so that you could at least get picked up by the SEO algorithms. And you could then, if somebody's typing in XYZ hat supplier, manufacturer, distributor, so that they could at least find you for the thing that you make, the thing that you're known for, so that they could at least know that you exist digitally. A lot of these brands, and even if they have an e-commerce website, it's gated. Meaning, if I'm a B2B customer
100%,
of a brand,
100%.
I have to log in before I can see the catalog, before I can see pricing, before I can see inventory, before I can engage with the brand at all. I have to authenticate, which means I have to have a trade account with them. I have to be assigned a price list with them. I have to have my MOQs and all that established, and my credit account established and credit checked, and that whole thing. I got to go through that whole entire process before I can even see the products in the digital catalog. It feels like brands, a lot of these legacy brands, feel like they are open to massive disruption. And I'm seeing that, for example, I was working with a B2B brand, and exclusively manufacturer, wholesaler, and distributor. They're actually all three, because they manufacture part of their catalog and they distribute other products. And see, this is actually very common in the B2B world, that maybe 20% of the catalog they make, and then the rest of the catalog they distribute. And this was a multi-billion-dollar vehicle parts and heavy equipment parts manufacturer. And they were based out of Singapore. They operated in New Zealand and Australia as well, and they distributed into New Zealand and Australia as well. They actually had corporate offices in New Zealand and Australia. And they had, when I first met with them, they had zero digital sales channels in the business at all, none, across any division. And they're a multi-billion-dollar a year business. They were starting, when I started working with them, they were just trialing self-service e-commerce in one business unit in one region, being New Zealand. They were using that as a proof of concept to see if they could make it work and to see if it was going to be used by their customers. And the only reason they were doing that was because there was a competitor that came into the market that was pure play digital competitor, didn't have warehouses where you could go and do will call and go and pick up products. It didn't have field sales at all. They were 100% online distributor of competitive products to these guys. And that was they had their feet held to the fire. They didn't want to do it. They just had no choice. But
that's what's going to happen.
And I'm seeing that happening more and more across many different verticals.
And I hate to say this as a salesperson, I don't want it to get too technologically advanced, because then you won't need me.
See, and I'm so glad you said that, because usually when I go in and I start consulting to these brands, when I walk through the door, the sales reps see me as the devil. But if the sales team will give me even 15 minutes to talk to them, I'll leave the building as their best friend. because I'm not here to replace salespeople. I'm here to give them superpowers. And I'm here to take away all the things that they hate doing, all the admin functions. I tell them, look, you tell me what you hate about your job, the things you hate doing. And 95% of the time, that's an admin function that you think technology should be doing instead of you. And I will free up 20 to 60% of your time to go and do what you do best, knock on new doors, build relationships, do the schmoozing, go to the lunches, take them to the ball games, build the relationship and acquire new customers, which is what your skill set is, and take away all this crappy pain of all the admin stuff that you do. And so
as a salesperson, I can tell you what happens.
Yep.
So let me give you my end of it.
Yeah.
So we set up a company on EDI, right?
Yep.
And I'm like, sweet. I don't have to. I was manually entering in every online sale.
Yep.
So I would get an email every day with 20 to 30 orders.
Yep.
And I'd spend anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes entering in all the orders.
Yep.
We go to EDI and it frees up my life, just like you just said.
Yeah.
The company goes, hey, since you're not working so hard, we're going to remove some of your commission percentage on those orders.
Yeah.
Yeah. I go, can I go? I want my money. Can I go back? I'm like, no. I'm like, let's undo the EDI. I'd rather make the money.
Yeah. And see, I am a massive advocate, and absolutely that's a risk. And I think that the B2B brands that do this to their sales reps, they're actually being very short-sighted, because the reality is you get what you incent, right? And you're never going to get your customers to adopt EDI or punch out or self-service e-commerce unless the sales reps are promoting it, holding their hand, onboarding them, etc. Right? So it's
what? I haven't suggested one other account go to EDI.
Exactly my point. So the reality is, and what I actually recommend is that B2B sellers incentivize their sales reps more for every order that comes through a digital sales channel, because it's more efficient for me as the brand. It's more efficient for me to process those orders. So therefore I say give them 1, 2, 3 extra points of commission for every order that comes through a digital sales channel instead of through them, right?
And they do just the opposite.
Yeah, which is, I think it's incredibly short-sighted. And the brands, the businesses that I see that find the most success with digital sales channels, it's because they, at the very least, keep parity regardless of the channel that the order comes through. They keep commission parity, or they additionally incentivize. The ones that see at the highest adoption rate of the digital channels that they invest in are the ones that incentivize the sales to come through those channels. And so you're right. These brands, they've got it twisted, right? They say, why would we go and spend $100,000 on something that may or may not be adopted by our customers? You can guarantee it won't be adopted by your customers unless your salespeople help onboard them into those channels. But then if you disincentivize the sales reps, it'll never happen. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. $100,000 and nobody uses it because the salespeople tell them not to. They say, no, you come through, right? Because I'm going to give you the best service. I'm going to give you the personalized service that you crave. So that's why I wanted to have this conversation with you, because I have never had, up until now, after I think we're on episode number 80 of the B2B Commerce Corner segment of this podcast. And I have to, when I go in and advise these brands, I talk about, because usually by the time these B2B brands bring me in, they're like, hey, we've got board approval, we've got a budget, we're ready to go. Help us do the platform search and select, help us scope it out, help us find a partner to do the implementation. Let's go. They're ready to pull the trigger. And I'm like, hang on a second. Have you done any adoption planning, internal or external, before we even go into scoping? Because I recommend every single seller do that, because if you don't do that beforehand and you don't get your internal team and your customers on board this bus, you will see zero adoption and you'll see no ROI from your investment. Yeah. And so I oftentimes I have to lead those conversations with the sales team, and I have to lead the conversation with their customers about, okay, what does e-commerce even mean to you? Because in the B2B world, oftentimes the B2B buyer, the B2B customer, they won't use the word e-commerce. They'll use terms like, we'd like to have a buyer portal, or we'd like to have an online catalog, or we'd like to be able to log in and see if you have inventory of the SKU, or we'd like to be able to see what other products you carry. Or they don't, oftentimes the sellers and the buyers in the B2B world, they don't necessarily even use the term e-commerce. That is more of a retail terminology. Just in the B2B world has a language and a dictionary all of its own. And
Yeah.
when the B2C,
It's a
B2C
whole
world,
new, exactly right.
it's a totally different language. It's a totally different language. And if you don't speak that language to them as a consultant, as an agency, or as a seller trying to canvas your buyers to find out what kind of digital services matter to them, unless you have those conversations, you will never know. And then you're almost guaranteed to be wasting your money. Because I tell you, I was working with a different auto parts supplier. They supplied wheels and hubs and a whole bunch of stuff to heavy equipment and OEM manufacturers of different equipment. And they asked me to come in and help lead the conversation with their customers about whether their customers even wanted them to offer e-commerce.
Right.
And when we first sat down and we said, does e-commerce matter to you? Would it be helpful to you? Would it make you more efficient? Would it be beneficial to you if this seller offered you an e-commerce portal? And they said, no, not really. No, we like Bob, we like Jane, we like our sales rep. We do everything through them. We're on the phone with them every single day. We send them emails, we send them faxes. We get great service. We get great service from our sales rep. Why would we need e-commerce? But when you recontextualize the question and you say, okay, let's set e-commerce to the side for a moment. If there were certain things you could do through a buyer portal, for example, if you wanted to log in and check the stock status of a product and how much they had it in inventory, what your price was for each of those SKUs, what your MOQ was, what the buying increment was. If you could make a quote request, because they currently do every quote request 100% manually through their sales rep, both for existing SKUs as well as new SKUs that they may want to have manufactured custom for them or brought in custom for them. For returns, 100% manual, 100% through customer service of the sales rep. And they said one of the other things that's a real pain point is we have no portal where we can log in and we can track our shipment from the time it leaves your warehouse to the time it arrives at our warehouse. And we need to have the receipting team scheduled to receive your shipment, because we're getting, we've got this massive warehouse that we have stuff coming in all day, every day. And if we don't have people there to de-van the product, it can sit out in our parking lot for 3 days until we can de-van it and actually get it scanned into inventory so that we can actually then sell it. And so I was like, so what you're telling me is you might not press the buy now button, you might not execute the transaction through an e-commerce website, but if we could do all these things, and you could check your freight rates and you could define whether you want it to be free on board on your account or whether you want them to ship it and then charge it to your account. You could download previous invoices. You could check the status of your credit account and your statement and all that sort of stuff. If you could do all that stuff online, it would really make your life easier, better, and more efficient, right? You'd still be dealing with John and Jane over here as your sales rep that you love, but you could self-service a lot of this other stuff that makes your life difficult right now. Oh yeah, we'd love that. We'd love that.
The issue I think you run into, Jason, this again, just solely my opinion, is you got manufacturers. You got the seller or the buyer, right? My customer might love the seller's portal, the buyer, the portal.
Yes.
As a rep, as long as it doesn't affect my income, I love it too.
Yes.
But if the manufacturer says, we got to pay for this somehow, we're not going to see a return on it, maybe ever, but or unquantifiable. You're not going to know how many more sales you have that you didn't have before.
Yes.
So let's take some of the commission away from the sales rep.
Yes.
They're going to be doing less work. So instead of 10%, let's give them 8%.
Yeah.
They're working less, so they should get paid less.
Yes.
And that 2% will help us pay for the setup of it all.
Yes.
But then if you have reps that go, hey, don't use the portal. It doesn't work that well. If you ever need something, just give me a call or send me an email and I'll put the order and make sure it goes through the right way.
Yes. Correct. Which is exactly the catch-22 I run into every single day,
buddy.
And it's so frustrating because this is so short-sighted. And what I'm finding is that many manufacturers are now having a gun held to their head by their distributors.
Yeah.
And the distributor who uses an e-procurement system like a Jagger or a Coupa or any one of the other major e-procurement systems that are out there, the distributors are saying our margins are so razor thin that unless you allow us to buy from you via e-procurement electronically, we're not going to buy from you anymore because it costs us too much. It costs us too much to buy from you manually, internally for us, the cost to us. And so some of these manufacturers they've got no choice. Some of their largest wholesale distribution customers are saying, you will offer us digital services, otherwise we're going to go buy somewhere else.
And I think every industry is going to be a little bit different.
Yes.
I'm in the apparel industry where people literally are still designing things by hand. They're doing hand drawings for a lot of things. They don't even use computer drawings on a lot of the stuff. They do once they get to the factory level, but
it has to, yeah, because they have to make an electronic tech pack version of what they've drawn up.
Yeah. But it's interesting. Like I said, if you don't get the salespeople on board,
forget it. It's not going to happen.
Assure them that's not going to affect their income and it's only going to be a benefit to them.
Yes.
Then I would be pushing the crap out of it. As a rep, I'd be like, hey, you know what? Now I can tell you one of the companies, if I suggest a customer to call, let's say I'm driving in LA traffic.
Yes.
I'm not going to get back to my computer for an hour and a half because I'm literally sitting in traffic. And hey, you know what? Why don't you call the office, corporate office, place the order with them. They'll get it in today. So maybe it can get shipped out today or at least first thing in the morning.
Yes.
If I do that as a rep, it's suggested by the VP that runs customer service. Why are we giving them commission if we're doing their work of entering the order?
Yep. And I see that too. I see that tension too.
I'm trying to provide better customer service because I can't get off the road.
Yes.
If I do that, it's suggested that I don't get.
Yes.
So guess what I don't suggest?
That they call customer service.
That's right.
So it goes back to my key premise. You get what you incent with salespeople. So you got to incentivize the right things. And so your key takeaway or your piece of advice would be basically exactly, it mirrors my advice, which is either at least keep digital sales channels on par from a commission perspective as the physical sales channels or the in-person sales channels or the email sales channels, for one. For two, if you really want to see high adoption of these newfangled digital technologies, incentivize your sales reps even more if orders come through those digital sales channels. Because at the end of the day, that's making you more efficient as a business, right? You're gonna gain 1, 2, 3, 4 points of efficiency. Share it with your bloody salespeople. That's the second thing. Third
that
thing,
won't happen. That won't happen.
It's interesting because some brands that I work with do that, and
they share those with me offline.
yeah, and they further incentivize. And they further incentivize the customer, the buyer, that they say they have a special price list for digital sales channels versus manually placed orders. So they'll get like an extra 1% discount or 2% discount or something like that. If they place their order electronically, they save an extra 1 or 2 points. And that also encourages the customer to migrate to digital sales channels. So if that incentivization structure is right, not only will you get massive buy-in internally, but you'll get massive buy-in externally too.
I'm on board with it. Like I said, I was ecstatic when I finally got, after 7 years, it took me to get our EDI system to work with my customers because they just kept switching out people and it wasn't going to work and bad timing. I finally get it set up, and then after I get it set up, they hit me with, "Hey, you don't need to make so much money now."
Wow, that's
and you're like, "Yeah, but I'm the one that set it up." And they're like, "Yeah, but you got paid, so why would I want ever to do that again?"
Yeah, why would I shoot myself in the foot like that? You've just shown your hand. You've just shown your true colors.
So I'm like, all right. And as a rep, what are you gonna do? You know,
you're gonna do what helps your pocketbook the best, and you're gonna work within the rules, but you're gonna do what feeds the family. You're gonna do what pays the best, right? At the end of the day. So
I think that's what you're dealing with on your end, because you're going out to the manufacturer, and the manufacturer goes, "If we just take a point or two away from the reps, we can pay for this.
Yeah,
pay for itself." Well,
I'm saying you're cutting off your nose to spite your face, because you'll never get adoption if you do that.
That's right.
So that's what I try to explain to them. I'm like, why would you go and spend $100,000-$300,000 on this amazing new project with system integrations and EDI support?
Inventory.
Why would you do all that and then not see any ROI from it because you're so short-sighted that you try to screw your sales reps out of 1 or 2 points of commission? It's so stupid. It makes no sense.
Yeah. And I mean, you understand, like, I've been doing this job for 14 years, right?
Yeah.
I've been to their homes. Like, I know their kids. We go to lunch and we don't talk about work.
Yeah.
And now you want me to, because they always, I think a lot of manufacturers go, hey, we make a great shirt. We make a great hat. That hat's going to sell with or without you.
Yes.
And it's like, to a certain extent, that's true. But then why don't you just sell direct?
Yeah. Yeah. Why don't you just do 100% D2C and not have any wholesale accounts at all?
Yeah. Why do you need retailers? If it's going to sell on its own, and you don't need reps,
just sell directly to the end customer.
Yeah.
It's so stupid. Listen, this has been fascinating. And I knew that we would have a great conversation because you're deeply embedded in this space. You're like me. I'm not young, but the funny thing is, my wife will tell you, and she's a fair bit younger than me, she'll tell you that even from a social media perspective, I'm at least as good at social media as her, if not better, because I live on it every single day as part of my job. Yeah. And so I think what this comes down to is the fact that age doesn't dictate how comfortable you become with new technology. I think that's the 100%. First takeaway. 100%. So I think that's the first takeaway that I would like to say is that you and I are perfect examples of a slightly older generation, but yet we don't let new technology terrify us. We don't just tolerate it, we actually embrace it. And we say, look, how can this make my life better? How can I take the very best of technology to improve my life and leave the rest, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's a really powerful lesson for anybody who's working in our space, who's maybe afraid of the AI revolution, or they were afraid, because the same people that are afraid of the AI revolution were probably afraid of the social media revolution, and were probably afraid of the
phone,
mobile device revolution before that. And so I think you got to get comfortable with change, because the pace of change is speeding up. It ain't slowing down. That's the first thing. Secondarily, I think the lesson and the takeaway for me, and hopefully by definition, my audience as well, is that, look, if you're in the B2B world, manufacturer, wholesaler, distributor, and you want your teams to embrace technology, and you want your customers to embrace the technology that makes you more efficient as a brand, then you better get your incentive structures right all across the board, because otherwise you won't get ROI. You'll go and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, and then you'll find, oh God, at the end of it, you'll go, why did we do all this? Because nobody's using it. Yeah. So you can have a Ferrari, but if you don't have the pit crew that knows how to run the Ferrari, you're going to be in trouble. It's not nobody. You got to have a driver. You got to have a driver for the Ferrari, and you got to have a pit crew. It's that simple.
Good luck. You got it. I think you have to get everybody on board, right?
Totally.
If you go, like I tell my retail stores have 5,000 square foot, and it's on Rosecrans Boulevard.
Wow.
So what is a 50-mile radius that might come shop in your store? Not even that, not in LA.
Yeah.
So maybe it's a 20-mile radius. But if you get online, you can now sell to Georgia, to Florida, but then they treat it like it's a secondary business versus a primary business. And it's always, and I'm sure it's the same way with you deal with manufacturers, trying to get them on board.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, we'll do that one piece, but we're not going to do the full gamut. And you're like, well, then why are you wasting your time?
Yeah. You won't see the ROI from it. So why don't we hold off until you've actually, because I make it a point, I will never sell the unsellable. So unless a brand sees the value in this, or their feet are already being held to the fire by the market, and basically they got a gun to their head, and they come to me and they say, we know we have to do this. We've got no choice. We just want to make sure we do it right. Then that's the perfect kind of client I want to work with. Because if I've got to come in and I've got to be a digital evangelist, and I've got to prove to them, if I've got to help them build the business case, now I can contribute to that process for sure. And I can help them run those internal and external interviews as an impartial outsider for sure. And I can ask questions of their customers that they never could. And their customers will be more honest and transparent with me than they will be with the supplier, because they don't want their supply cut off. But the reality is that I refuse to sell the unsell. After almost 25 years in this game, I am not going to try to convince anyone that they should be executing on the digital sales opportunity. I'm just not going to do it. And there's enough brands out there that get it, that I can focus on helping them execute at a really high level. I'd rather focus on those folks. And that's what I think 100%. Is exciting. Now, the final thing I'll leave you with here is the very exciting thing is that even some of the most mainstream technology providers to the retail space, they're starting to get religion about B2B. They're starting to realize it. Even Shopify themselves, they've now just started to massively resource B2B on Shopify Plus as a key functional set of their platform. So that gives me hope that even the dyed-in-the-wool retailers are starting to realize, and especially D2C brands, so manufacturers that have only ever sold to the end consumer historically, the rising CAC cost is forcing them to look at strategic wholesale relationships so that they can bring their customer acquisition costs down and they can increase their distribution and brand presence in the market. And that gives me hope. That makes me feel good because it was the decade of D2C. The last 10 years have been the decade of direct to consumer. But I tell you, even Nike themselves, vaunted Nike, has admitted they screwed up with their investment and their focus on D2C and shutting off their wholesale accounts, a significant portion of their wholesale accounts. They've had to backtrack on that, and they have replaced their CEO with a longtime Nike CEO who he said, I'm focused on two things: reestablishing a good relationship with our wholesale partners and our retail partners, and product innovation. That is his two mandates in the business. So I have hope that the wholesale space, the manufacturers, wholesalers, and distributors, they not only have better access to technology than they ever have, but I think as the younger generation come online and have digital expectations, it's going to cause rapid change in the industry. I'm really looking forward to it.
It's interesting. Can I share one more thing with you? There's a brand, a boot brand based in Mexico, and brand new. I want to say probably maybe pre-COVID. Wow. When they started, right? And they went direct to consumer.
Yep.
They only sold direct. They didn't sell through any distribution, no retail stores. Then they started their own retail stores. And now, 4 or 5 years later, that they built up their brand name, which they did, they spent millions in advertising.
Of course.
They are now setting up a wholesale business. And all the retailers are like, no, thanks.
Yeah. You snubbed us in the beginning, so screw you now.
Yeah. So you built up the business. You're my own competition with your brand.
Yes.
So why would I want to sell your product in my store, take up space when my competition is you?
Yeah.
Like, it's bad enough I got to fight all these other retailers, but I got to fight the manufacturer too. They're like, no. So they're having a hard time getting penetration at the wholesale level now.
It's the same with Allbirds. I mean, you may have heard recently that they're just about out of business. And as a last effort to save the company, they were staunchly anti-wholesale for the whole duration of their business until about 6 months ago. And even on their website, they said, we do not sell wholesale, flat out. Now they're taking on new distributors in Europe and globally, and they're realizing we can't do this all on our own. And again, they have physical retail stores. They've got online. They're one of the most famous brands on Shopify. But they have realized we cannot be everywhere our potential customers are, no matter how much money we spend. So they realize we have to have wholesale and retail partners. It is that simple. I think wholesale is here to stay. It's not going anywhere anytime soon. And in fact, it's becoming more important to DTC brands than ever before. Listen, mate, this has been a fantastic conversation. I've learned a ton. It's a perspective that I haven't ever had on the podcast before. So I'm really grateful for that perspective and that lens on the market. Now, as we come down to the end of our time together, this is where I get to flip the script, hand the microphone over to you, let you ask me one question, any question you like. It could be personal or professional. So, Pete KOTZBACH, what is your question for me today?
Why do you think wholesale is coming back? See, just the opposite right now. Mm-hmm. Because as a rep, I can tell you there's multiple brands that have fired all their entire rep teams. Another huge brand in our industry, huge, 100 million plus, just reduced all their sales reps salary and bonus structure, and it's above minimum wage, don't get me wrong, but it's not, I don't see any manufacturer in my trade treating their reps good.
Yeah, and I think it's a very short-sighted view. And I think that a lot of these manufacturers, they think that once they implement digital technologies, that they actually won't need reps at all. And just like Nike, I think they're going to find themselves in a real pickle when it dawns on them, geez, actually, it was a relationship-based business. Oh, geez, relationships do matter. Oh, people with domain expertise and their understanding of the market and their understanding of the players in the market and who to contact and the relationships that have been built over a decade, those actually, and it's all fine and good to say we're going to do digital customer acquisition. We're going to open our website. It's going to be indexed by Google. Yeah. We're going to be able to do digital marketing, all that sort of stuff. What they oftentimes find at the end of the day is that they don't have the digital chops they think they do. And they're actually a decade behind their retail counterparts. And retailers oftentimes have massive digital shops. So they've got digital teams, they've got e-commerce managers, they've got heads of digital, they've got CDOs. In most cases, these major manufacturers and wholesalers, they don't even have a digital team until I get there and I help them hire, or I help them promote from within, or I help them go to market and find the right people to work in the business, and help them set up their org structure to support digital channels and all that sort of stuff. And I just think this industry is going to go through a crucible moment, and it already is starting to, where just like in the D2C world, they thought, geez, if we are a pure play digital retailer, we got it made. We got the lowest cost structure. We'll be able to sell globally, definitely, at least countrywide. We'll have lower operating costs than our physical retail counterparts. But what was proven without a shadow of doubt, especially at the end of COVID, when we went back to the mean, the split between physical versus digital retail, e-commerce still is only, depending on vertical and category, between 20 and 30% of total retail sales. And of that 20 or 30%, half of that is Amazon. So the reality is the rest of the D2C, direct-to-consumer players, only have about 15% of the total market that they can play in. The TAM, the total addressable market, exploded during COVID, but it's gone back to the mean. And we see that those physical retail experiences matter, and they're going to matter for the foreseeable future. And I think the same revolution, or the realization that has come to retail, is coming to wholesale too. And a lot of brands that try to eliminate their sales teams, they're cutting off their nose to spite their face, and they're losing a lot of institutional knowledge, but more importantly, institutional relationships when they do that. And it's awfully hard to get those people back, because usually when you fired those people, even if you come to your senses 6 or 12 months later, and even if you're willing to pay them more, they've moved on, and you're never going to get them back, and you've lost that capability forever. Yeah, I'm trying to preach. I am out here I want to give sales reps superpowers. I don't want to replace them. I want to augment them, and I want to take away their pain. And every brand I work with, this is a consistent message I'm giving to them, because the ones that I see succeed are the ones that leverage the humans to do what humans do best, which is build and maintain relationships. It's that simple.
Yeah. If you get the sales reps on board, it makes it a lot easier.
Oh, hell yes. Oh, yeah. You can't do it without them. You can't do it without them. And in many cases, what I find is that when we go in and we're trying to get the data ready for digital channels, the data is in the sales reps' heads. Yeah. Or at least they know where on the shelf with the specific physical catalog to get the information that they then maybe, or they know on the network drive where they need to get the information that they download and then they send to their customers. And oftentimes the leadership in the business, they're not even fully aware of just what the sales rep does behind the scenes that allows them to be so good at what they do. They have no idea. And so when we start going through the digitalization process, starts becoming pretty apparent, because these people have to inform the entire data gathering and organization process too, because they know where the data is and they know how it should be structured to be able to sell it. So sales are indispensable in most cases. Now, of course, not all salespeople are created equal. And some of them are just, they've just got their snout in the gravy chain trough. And, I'm not going to say that everyone is amazing, but the ones that are really good at their job and they're true consummate professionals like yourself, man, they matter. They build businesses. They build and maintain businesses. It's that simple.
I'm going to send this episode to my bosses anonymously.
I love it. Listen, it's been a fabulous conversation. I really appreciate your contribution to the discussion, because this is a perspective I haven't had on the podcast before, and it's been really enlightening. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Appreciate sharing. Thanks for having me on, Jason.
Are you a B2B or D2C e-commerce merchant? Then head over to greenwoodconsulting.net to learn how we can help you scale your business.